So here's what we're going to do. We are going to walk through the final three key ideas and then actually leave you quite a bit of time at the end for some discussion with your different regions and different folks. And I really cannot stress to you enough the importance of making sure you leave here having made the connections that you need to make. There's so much power in that. And so I really want you to take advantage of that. A couple other things. I am not a book peddler. I really just don't want to have to carry these back on the plane with me. That's my primary concern, is I don't want to carry them with me. This is the new book that we just put out, which is called Reframing Foster Care, Filtering Your Foster Parenting Journey Through the Lens of the Gospel. That's a lot, but essentially it is reflections on our foster parenting journey, all the way from loving kids we've had to let go to feeling like failures and how do we process through that, and helping families on the front end who are preparing for foster care or who are in the trenches filter their whole experience through the grid of the gospel. That's as simple as I can state it. Because we all think through our own biases, whether we realize it or not. And there's this thing called confirmation bias, and it basically works like this. This is what I think and why I think it, and I'm going to search for pieces of evidence around me that confirm what I think and why I think it. And sometimes what's really helpful for us is when we have somebody step in and kind of burst that bubble a little bit, just pop us out of it and help us to think through things differently, from a different perspective. I believe, fundamentally, the absolute best grid through which we can process not just our foster care and adoption journey, but all of life is the grid of the gospel. And so that's what that is. The unique thing about this is I don't just want to write resources that you can sit in a coffee shop alone and read, although that's fine. I also want to write resources that can be used, not just read, but also used. And so in here, in each chapter, are group discussion questions. So it can be used as a support group discussion guide. There's also personal reflection questions. So it can even be used as kind of a personal devotional type thing for foster families, adoptive families, those considering it. I only brought a handful. A couple of them have been picked up. I'm not sure where, but I don't want to leave with any of them. So if you're interested in that at all, I would encourage you, if you're thinking maybe this is something, so we do bulk orders for agencies, churches, organizations, send them out. It's only been out for a couple weeks, but we've sent a bunch of orders all over to different groups. And if you're saying, yeah, maybe we'll use that for our ministry as a support, but I'd love to check it out first, please do that. I actually encourage you to do that. Vet it out. Make sure it is what you need it to be. And then if you want to explore bulk orders, there's discounts for that. We have agencies giving them away to their families as gifts. We have church ministries giving them away, using them as support groups. So there's that. I'm done with that. I don't like selling books. I don't like peddling it. I wish I didn't have to sell them. I would just give them away. But I don't want to fly home with them tomorrow. So please. All right. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually wrap up a couple things on our small experiment, and then we're going to jump into the final three components of movement that we've been talking about. Oh, no, we're going to wrap up. Did we wrap up on micro goals? Great. Yep. So we're going to start with small experiments. Number one, we talked about using what you already have. Number two, we talked about setting micro goals. And number three, when it comes to establishing movement and moving people from point A to point B, discipling people from point A to point B, using what we already have, setting micro goals that we can celebrate. We'll talk about celebrations in a minute. Number three, conducting small experiments. The main idea here is taking risks, failing, and learning from them. So my daughter, who lives, eats, and breathes soccer, has this hanging on her wall. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Basically, it means this: don't be so afraid to miss that you never actually shoot. So when it comes to ministry, when it comes to trying things, the hesitation sometimes is if we try and fail, then we're failures. And the truth is that when you try and fail, you're just a learner, not a failure. That these are opportunities for us to learn. A small experiment helps grow the ministry if it works, but because it's a small experiment, it doesn't compromise the integrity of the whole ministry if it doesn't work. It doesn't rise or fall on the success or failure of one particular thing you're trying to do. And it actually helps us reframe and rescript our definition of success. The event or the thing that we tried may not have turned out the way that we hoped, but we learned from it, therefore it was a success. So let's do a little case study. Maybe the small experiment is you want to host an informational meeting for prospective foster and adoptive families. The outcome was low attendance, but there was still a special time of connection. So let's, we can always, in ministry, we're real good at turning low attended events into, but it was just so sweet. Sometimes just smaller events are just so much nicer to be in, right? We like to kind of flip it like that, make ourselves feel better. So that's what we've done here. Nobody came, but the people who did come, it was just so sweet and so good to be in a room together. Okay. And then we can't fall asleep that night because we're just failures, right? So outcome, low attendance, but it was still special. So let's look at the positive. The impact on the ministry, relatively minimal. No major positive or negative outcomes. Like it doesn't, okay, we're just kind of right where we left off, right? Lessons learned. Maybe our promotion was weak. As we look back, was there a problem? Did people even know about it? Actually, you know what? The more that we asked people, did you know about this? They kept saying, no, I didn't hear about it. Why not? Maybe that's a sign to us that our promotion was weak and we can do that better next time. The meeting time was inconvenient. Maybe it was a Wednesday evening and our target audience is young families and they've got all these activities. Maybe we need to adjust the meeting time. Maybe we heard from people, they said, we would have loved to be there, but fill in the blank. Action items. Let's develop a 1-month promotion campaign. Figure out how to make sure people know about it. And let's schedule a meeting right after church on Sunday because everybody's already there. And in the church world, once they leave, it's very hard to get them back. So let's capitalize them on them being there, having the childcare space, provide a free meal. And then maybe on the second event, we'll see slightly higher attendance and momentum produced for the ministry. This is a small experiment. Something that we can learn from. The primary goal of your small experience is that. It's to learn. It's to learn. Your entire ministry doesn't rise and fall on one particular event or aspect of your ministry. It's the sum total of all the different things you're doing cumulatively that ultimately sets the foundation. But there's something to be said for trying things that might not work, but still learning from them. Trying things and failing can teach you more about the people you're serving. Well, you know what? It was a Wednesday night, and everybody said that didn't work for them. We've learned something about the people we're trying to serve. We're learning something about their schedule and their routine and how to schedule around what their life, the culture of your church, the environment in which you're doing ministry, the leadership temperaments of your team. I say that because if you're working with a team and something doesn't work, you're going to see the temperaments of your team, right? How did they respond to it? Were they devastated by it? Were they anxious because of it? Were they mad? Were they angry? How did they respond? You're going to learn a lot about your team, when things work and when they don't work. The effectiveness or lack thereof of your communications, the clarity of your vision. Are the words that we're saying actually being heard? Or are the words that we think we're saying actually being heard? I'll give you an example of that. When I was pastoring our church plant, every couple months or so, not a real firm schedule, but just when we felt like it was time, we would host what we call the Discovery Lunch. Okay, there seems to be a lot of new people that have been hovering around. Let's offer them a free lunch after church one Sunday. It's not membership class. It's just kind of hey, come and discover what our church is about. You'll meet some leadership, and you'll be able to have some questions answered. Super, super easy, no commitment, no strings attached. One thing that we did at the Discovery Lunches is we would put on the table in front of them a sheet of paper with a list of words. And all of these words were values. They were perceived values like mercy, justice, foster care, adoption, gospel, all these kinds of words. And we would ask them to go through and mark the words that they feel like in their limited exposure to our church, maybe it had been a week, maybe it had been 2 months, as best as you can tell, mark the words that you feel like describe our church, are things that our church are involved in, things that are values to our church. And they would do that, and at the end, we would collect them, and then as a team the following week, we would look at them, and we would cross-reference them, and someone would map them out and tell us how many people selected the words that were selected. And we would get a report. And what that report told us was this. We think, we were looking to make sure that everybody checked certain words and certain things. right? Because these are things that we think we are communicating to our church. Like if they didn't check the word gospel, like either, well, that would be their fault. They're just not paying attention, right? So that one has to be checked, right? But there were other things like foster care. Is that a normal part? You've been here 2 months. Is it normal to hear about it? We want them to check it, different things like that. Compassion International was another one. So what it told us, it was a litmus test. Because as a leadership, we can kind of lead in a vacuum sometimes. Like we're throwing stuff out there and we think maybe our people are getting it. And what these reports told us is whether or not they're actually hearing the words we think we're saying to them. And if we felt like, man, they're not checking the words that we want them to be checking, we're not communicating as well as we think we should be. Does that make sense? So it helps you clarify your vision and the clarity of your message as well. It ensures that you're reinforcing the values of your ministry, and you're not being that guy that the ministry is trying to do and everyone can do something model, but then the way that you're actually communicating that is too narrow. It doesn't reinforce that. So your primary goal of small experiences is to learn. Here's the hope and the kind of the beauty of the gospel wrapped up in all of this, not just in our ministry, but in all of life. That God is more pleased by your willingness to be faithful than he is concerned with there's a typo. He's not pleased with that typo. I can tell you that. He's more concerned with your willingness to be faithful than he is concerned with your ability to achieve a certain set of outcomes. God is more concerned with your willingness to be faithful to what he's called you to do than he is concerned with your ability to achieve a certain set of outcomes. One of my favorite passages to look at when we look at that, and we share this a lot with foster and adoptive families, and I think it's even in the book itself, is Hebrews chapter 11, our hall of faith, right? The first half of Hebrews 11 is fantastic. Sells a lot of books, fills a lot of church pews. Well, I want that kind of Christianity. And it talks about how it was faith that caused the Red Sea to split and the Egyptians to be killed and the Israelites to be set free. It was faith that caused the walls of Jericho to fall. It was faith that shut the mouths of lions and defeated enemies. And we're like, yes, sign me up for that faith. Love it, right? The second half of Hebrews 11 says, but then there were also others who were cut in half, who were martyred, who were destitute, who were persecuted, basically they were failures in terms of the things that they were trying to do. And then the end of Hebrews chapter 11, the last verse says, and all of them were commended for their faith. All of them, those that caused the walls of Jericho to fall, and those who were cut in half, destitute, and tortured. All of them were commended for their faith. So God says, well done, good and successful servant. No, well done, good and faithful servant. All of them were commended for their faith. So my encouragement to you is to continue to be faithful to what God's called you to do. Not what God has called other people to do and you're comparing yourself to them, but to what God has called you to do, and the resources God has given you, and the church God has given you, and the ministry God has given you. Conduct small experiments. Don't be afraid to try and fail. Don't be so afraid of failing that you never actually try anything. The absolute best way for us to learn the culture and the rhythm of the people that God's called us to serve is to try things with them. Number 4. So we've got use the existing. We've got conduct small experiments. We've got, set micro goals. And now inspect what you expect. The main idea here is if you don't address it, you endorse it. Have follow-up. How are we measuring? How are we holding ourselves accountable to the things that we're doing? How are we measuring the outcomes? While our hope and our faith is not dependent on the outcomes, when we do something, how are we measuring whether or not it produced the results, or was it effective as we hoped it would be? Measuring outcomes does a few things to determine the effectiveness of a resource, program, or event. So maybe we have our families use a curriculum or a guide or go to a conference or watch a video or something. Let's get feedback from them. Was it helpful? Was it good? Is it something that we continue to use in the future? And here's a marker for me, which is incredibly important. Is it actually answering the question? Is it answering the questions you are actually asking? Because here's what's often the case is sometimes we can go to conferences, we can attend things, and even my anxiety over an event like this is I want to make sure that the questions you are actually asking are getting answered, and that we're not just talking over people's heads, right? So is it actually answering their questions and the kinds of questions that people like you are asking? Was it effective? To identify the most effective practices. Is the way that we did that, was that the most effective? Can we amend it? Can we shift it? Can we change it when we do it again? And number 3, to reinforce clarity and consensus around the vision of your ministry. So your team does something, I can guarantee that Mandy and her team after this will probably put their heads together and say, all right, how did it go? What did we learn? What can we do better next year? What was our feedback? Let's remind ourselves of the vision of why we do what we do, and let's make those the decisions we need to make that help fulfill that vision the best that we possibly can. And that's a good, healthy thing. Sometimes we need to conduct the so what test. This sounds a little harsh, and that's okay. You'll be okay, right? Sometimes we need to conduct the so what test. So what is not an indictment, it's an encouragement. Here's what so what says. Hey, we had an event and a bunch of people came. So what? So what? And that's not an indictment, it's an encouragement. Because it helps you determine whether or not the time, energy, and resources you are pouring in are producing the results you want. It asks transformational questions, not just numerical ones. We had a bunch of people come to an informational meeting. So what? Was it effective? Did people feel connected? Was vision clearly communicated? Are the next steps that they need to take clear for them? Is the path clear for them? Oh, well, I don't know. But it was cool. We had a lot of people there. So what, right? So what now? An example, how many people attended the event versus how has this program, event, or resource made a difference in the lives of families and children, children, and our community? Is it actually working? Because if not, so what? Let's find something that actually will and does. The success of your ministry is not determined by its size, but by its significance in the lives of those God has given you to serve. Some ministries are going to be huge and highly ineffective in the long term. I see them all over. They are very, very busy with a lot of activities, but they're really not doing a whole lot that's of gravity, that's of substance, to be honest with you. And then some of the most effective, fruitful, substantial ministries I see are a small group of leaders being faithful to the small group of people that God has entrusted to them. And the temptation for us, because of the world we live in, is to look at the big one and say, clearly they are more significant and impactful. When in reality, in the economy of God, he flips all of that upside down. He says, no, it's not about size, it's about significance. And so again, my encouragement to you is the absolute best thing you can do for your ministry is be faithfully serve with significance the people that God has entrusted into your care. Don't be so bummed and frustrated about the ones that you don't have that it's causing you to neglect the ones that you do. Right? Now I'm preaching to myself as a church planter, right? But that's just all of life, right? We want to be significant. At the end of our days, we want to close up shop on our lives and say, you know what? Yeah, life was busy, but gosh, it was busy doing some really great, meaningful things. Not it was busy just for the sake of being busy and chaotic, right? So consider implementing something like this, feedbacks and surveys. Just simple statements after you do something in your ministry, small or large, that you're constantly getting feedback, statements that you're asking people to respond to. Like, I came away better equipped for adoption, foster care, and or global orphan ministry because of this event, program, or resource. Would you agree or disagree with that? Yeah, I would agree with that. Great. I would recommend this event, resource, program to a friend. So here's a cool thing that you can do with people in your church and in your ministry is you can introduce resources and opportunities to them, and then you can create buy-in from them and give them a voice to speak into it on the back end. You know, so they're not just a consumer. Now they are contributing to the ministry moving forward. Hey, we want to use this new thing or to try this new thing with you, and we want you to consume it. But then on the back end, we want to turn into a contributor and help us moving forward make it better. So you're getting that feedback from them. I'm going to incorporate what I've learned from this material into my life. Questions they can answer. What content or ideas would you like to see included next time? What was missing? Are you likely to attend this event again in the future? Would you recommend this Bible study curriculum or resource to a friend? What was the most impactful thing for you about this event program? Just simple things that we can put out there that people can help respond and help refine our ministry. And it's a really, really easy, powerful way to turn consumers into contributors and give them buy-in and make them feel like they have a voice into the overall ministry and where things are headed. Finally, we're actually going to end up with a lot of time, if that's okay. All right? We'll do some Q&A and then we'll have y'all do your table time. Number 5, celebrate successes. So we have talked about using the existing, setting micro goals, conducting small experiments, inspecting what you expect, and now celebrating successes. This is probably one of my favorite. The main idea here is reward the wins. Give yourself permission to celebrate successes. Like, it's okay. It's all right. We are a destination-oriented people, to the extent that we often fail to recognize the joy and the beauty and even sometimes the struggle of the journey, right? We fail to live in the moment. I was reminded of this not long ago. My daughters are getting to the age where every once in a while, if I can, I want to bring them along one-on-one with me when I travel. So last year I was doing an event in Chicago and I took my 12-year-old daughter with me. Now for me, I travel so often that I become numb to the whole process. You kind of have to just numb yourself out to make it through the process sometimes. And it's just relatively uneventful for me. The whole process of getting there, of getting through security, going through all the motions, getting my cup of coffee, being the last on the plane, because that's what I like to wait for the last call. Why spend any more time in that tube than I have to, right? That's me. Getting off, the hassle of getting in the car rental, all that stuff, right? Yesterday was like an 11-hour travel day. Totally numb to the whole thing, okay? Because just get me where I need to go, right? And don't get in my way. No delays, no interruptions, destination focused, okay? Now, my daughter, last year when she came to Chicago with me, ruined the whole experience for me, okay? But in a good way. Because what had become rote and numb for me was overwhelmingly exciting for her. The whole process. Pulling into the airport in Houston, getting out, her just mesmerized by how big it was. The fact that we had to take a train from one side of the airport to the other, right? She says it's like a city. You could live in here, right? I'm like, yeah, annoying, right? You know, it's so big. For her, what was annoying to me was fascinating to her, right? Getting on the plane, feeling it take off, the look on her face as she looks at me like, is this okay? Is this supposed to be happening? Yes, this is good, right? She's taking pictures out the window the entire time. Until I finally say, hey, put it down and just look at it with your own eyes, right? We eventually start landing and she feels it go down. Is this okay? Yes, it's okay, right? This is supposed to be happening. We land. The whole Chicago O'Hare experience is just awful, right? She loved every second of it, right? Like, golly. Finally get to the car, start driving downtown. We pull around, get into downtown right as the sun's setting, and I'll give you this. It was pretty awesome, the sight of the skyline and the sun setting, and she's taking pictures, and I say, put it down, look with your own eyes, and we get downtown, and it just reminded me that I can sometimes get so destination focused that I lose sight of the journey. And it's really in the journey where God is saying, here's where I want to do some really great stuff, right? You think the great stuff is going to come down here, but I got all this great stuff right here for you. And I was reminded to just don't forget about how great the journey is. And it's good and it's hard and it's bad. And I get texts from my wife, like right now, about how sucky the journey is right now, right? But that's okay. Because if we were just focused on the destination for Guyana, then we would look back on where we are now. We'd say, gosh, that's the destination that we want her, and we are so far from that clearly we are just failing. Because we grade ourselves on the destination, not on the journey. And I think God's saying, look, just enjoy the journey. Celebrate the successes along the way. Learn from the failures that you might experience and turn them into successes. And so I think it's important for us to give ourselves permission to celebrate the successes, not just in ministry, but in life as well. And even as you communicate to your families, you preemptively give them the answers they are going to need and help them rehearse their responses to the situations they're going to face before they get into them, right? And this is one way that you can do that. There's going to come a point in your journey where you are convinced you are failing. And let's not make them figure out how to respond to that in that moment. Let's help them rehearse that moment long before they ever get there so that they know how to handle it in a healthy way. So I work for an organization. Part of my job is I work for an organization. And every week we have a staff call. We all work remotely. And every week somebody gets the WIG award, Wildly Important Goals or something like that. We celebrate that staff person. The president of the organization celebrates them, and then they get sent a gift card. And it's so simple, but it's so significant. And it actually is the kind of thing where everybody who wins the WIG award that week, whenever you do, you're kind of embarrassed by it because all the attention's on you, because it's almost more fun to see other people win the WIG award and get the gift card because you get a glimpse into what's going on with them and how cool is it to celebrate for them. It's a really simple thing that is incredibly significant to our team. It's just this continual celebration of the successes. Every time we get to a new light post, let's stop for a moment and celebrate it. We made it. How great is that? It helps build momentum. It helps increase commitment. People see it's working. There's movement. I want to be a part of that. It helps facilitate community. Because, man, every time we celebrate, have you ever been on a hard journey? Maybe it's a mission trip and you're out working all day long, or even like when I was a youth pastor, we'd go play paintball all the time, and you're out in the field, and and then you come back afterwards, and everybody sits around and they tell stories of what happened that day, right? Oh, it was so funny when he came around the tree and I shot him in the face. Oh yeah, I saw that, stuff like that. And that's just this really cool, natural incubator for community where we can sit around and say, gosh, remember that? That was awesome. Did you see that? Did you see that? It helps facilitate community. It establishes culture, this regular rhythm that we are going to have a celebratory culture. It reinforces vision. Hey, let's celebrate. We've made it to another light post. And let's be reminded of why we're doing what we're doing and where we're headed. And it produces hope. It produces hope for people that movement is happening and we're headed in the right direction and God is being faithful. So let's create these postcard celebrations. One of my favorite authors talks about creating postcard celebrations. And here's what he means by that. I'll flip over and then we'll come back. Here's another interesting chart. I like charts. So they help me make sense of things in my head. So here's what we're doing. We've talked about moving to this funnel and how we want to pull people back and see the broader picture in terms of their involvement and how they can creatively step into a space. At the same time, we also want to continue to point people towards the bigger picture. And oddly enough, the bigger picture is at the tip of this funnel, okay? So this isn't a contradiction to what we're saying. We want people to step back and see the bigger picture and then know the steps they need to take forward in their own unique creativity for how to reach that end goal. And this author talks about how the end goal is like a big mural on the wall. Imagine it, like this whole wall is this mural and everybody sees the picture. We all know where the picture is. We know what the picture it looks like. I can see it on the wall. There it is. That's the picture that we're all shooting for. Now, every time we reach a light post, we stop and we celebrate, and we call that a postcard celebration. Because there's the big picture we're all shooting for, but right now we're going to stop and celebrate and hold a smaller version of that picture in our hands, like a postcard size, just to be reminded that God is faithful, that movement is happening, we're headed in the right direction, and this is reminding you, this is giving you a smaller glimpse of the big picture that's out there in front of all of us. Does that make sense? That we're establishing this regular rhythm of postcard celebrations. We're putting into people's hands a smaller picture of the big mural we're all shooting for, and it's reminding them that their work is worth it. It's reminding them of the vision that we're all catalyzed around, and it's reminding them that God is faithful and that He's moving. So creating these postcard celebrations, the vision of your ministry is the big picture. Like a mural on a wall, it's beautiful and diverse. The postcard celebrations are smaller, easier to hold on to moments that remind your people of the mural we're all working towards and God's goodness. Postcard celebrations are smaller, easy opportunities to recognize what God is doing in your ministry. And if we're not careful, those moments will pass us by, and then it'll be too far gone to turn. It's like it'd be awkward now for you to celebrate it, right? Like, wasn't that like a year and a half ago? Yeah, but so be attentive and be discerning that something cool has happened, and we want to draw attention to it and hold it up as a postcard that's pointing us all to this mural. What are some examples of things like that? Maybe it could be another family starts the licensing journey. Celebrate that. Like, let people know about that, right? I was at an event this last week in Indianapolis, and they held their first Sunday night community-wide support group, not just for their church, but for other churches as well. Their church is just rocking and rolling internally, and they said, we just feel this burden to open this thing up once a month on a Sunday night and invite other foster and adoptive families into the room. And it was a huge success. They had like 80 people there, and it was awesome. And I said, I asked them afterwards, how are the people in your church going to know that this just happened? And they said, I don't know. We haven't thought about that. I said, you need to figure out real quick how in the next few days or next Sunday, you can communicate to your whole church what happened Sunday night. Because otherwise, it'll just fly under the radar, and nobody will ever know about it. And Mission Point needs to know that Mission Point opened its doors and gave a huge gift to the community last Sunday night. And celebrate it, right? Find ways to celebrate it. It might not be from the stage for you. It might be other ways. It might be through an email list or a Facebook post, but be very attentive to opportunities to celebrate, because it helps produce hope and momentum and remind people of the bigger picture that you're all shooting for. So, that's where we are. Using the existing. The answers to what you need are often found in the things you already have. Setting micro goals, set goals small enough to reach, yet still meaningful enough to strive for. Inspect what you expect. Establish accountability measures for goals and action items. Small experiments. Sometimes the greater goal of something isn't success, but learning. And then celebrating success. Create a culture that recognizes, reinforces, and rewards the wins.